Previews are a very powerful component of Aperture, and it's best to understand them completely before we get too far into them. So to do that, let's start by going to the Aperture Preferences menu, and from there, we'll click on Previews. Previews in Aperture are JPEGs that are automatically generated by the software at a specific size and quality that you determine. Those JPEG previews are used for all sorts of things. Now first off in the preferences, you'll see that it says New Projects Automatically Generate Previews. That's an option that I can turn off or on. By leaving that on, and it's on by default, Aperture will automatically generate a preview for every photo that is imported. If you want to save space, you can actually turn that off. If you have a really large library, that could be a good idea. But for most users, leaving that on is a pretty good idea. You can also choose to share those previews with iLife and iWork, either always, when quitting Aperture, or never. The reason these are in here is because it does take a little bit of time to update the database for sharing with iLife and iWork. If you leave it at always, every time you switch out of the application, it'll take a couple moments to update the database. However, if you leave it at when quitting Aperture, then it'll only update the database when you quit. However, if you're swapping back and forth between Aperture and iLife or iWork, you may find that to be a little bit annoying because you won't have the update in the iLife and iWork media browsers that you might be looking for. Or you can alternatively set it to never. This is the fastest way to work because there's no database to be updated. However, you won't be able to automatically share your work between iLife and iWork. Now that doesn't mean you can't bring your photos into iLife and iWork. What it does mean though is that you will not be able to see them in the media browser. You also have the ability to choose the size of your photo preview. So for example, here you see we have it set by default to half size. That means you're going to have a JPEG that is half the size of the original photo that was imported. Or you can choose to not limit it, so it's the exact same size as the original photo, or you can choose to make it even smaller. By the way, if you see a size with an asterisk next to it, that means that is the closest size to match your current screen resolution. The default is half size, and that's pretty useful, so we'll leave it there. You also see that you have a photo preview quality. This is basically a JPEG quality. You can make it all the way up to 12, all the way down to 0, which is a really low quality image. The default is 8, and that's a pretty good place to be. This gives you a nice balance of size versus quality. So, what happens when these previews are generated? Well, let's exit the preferences here, and all of these images here do have previews generated for them. If I want to see that, all I have to do is click and drag on a photo, and then Command Tab over to another application, for example the Finder, where I can now drag and drop that picture into the Finder. That's the JPEG preview made from the photo that we are looking at here in Aperture. So other than sharing our photos with other applications, what good does the preview do us? Well, a couple things. As I click on a photo, you'll notice the loading indicator in here is displayed. That loading indicator shows up while Aperture processes the file from the raw file in the Finder. Each time we load a file, it has to load up. Now, once you select a file and it loads, and then you go back to it, it may not have to load again until the cache is cleared, but at some point you'll see the same photos loading up over and over again. What this means is Aperture is translating to screen from the raw file and applying any adjustments that you may have applied, all in near real time. But sometimes near real time isn't quite fast enough, and if you want to quickly go through your photos, you may find that this takes a little bit too much time, especially if you're on a slower machine. So this is where the quick preview mode becomes very, very handy. You'll notice over here a little icon that is the quick preview mode. When I turn that on, my images are outlined in yellow, and also we see quick preview displayed here. Now as I go through the photos, I'm actually only looking at the JPEG image, so I'm only looking at a file that's half the size of the original. This can be a very effective way to quickly go through your photos and find your best ones, without having to wait for each image to load. However, if you want to get a really close look at the photo, it's not really the best way. Because if I tap the Z key now to zoom in, we're zooming into 100%, but not 100% of the original image. We're only zooming into 100% of the preview file. And I know that because if I turn off the preview, we'll see that that same picture at 100% is actually considerably larger. But there is a way to check the full quality of an image while it's in preview mode, and that is using the loop. Whenever you bring up the loop, you will always be seeing the raw image. As you can see here, set at 100%, as I roll over the stop sign, it is actually quite a bit larger, double the size of the image we're seeing behind it. So the loop allows us to see the image at 100% from the raw file, even when we're in preview mode. To hide the loop, you can simply tap the loop key up here, or tap the tilde key on the keyboard, and that will hide that away. The keyboard shortcut to turn the preview on and off is simply the P key. So preview files in Aperture can make navigating very quick and easy, and also make it very easy to share your images outside of Aperture. Again, you can drag and drop them to the Finder, into an email, into a chat window, or whatever you like.